Hey, everybody, it's Thomas Miller along with Jenny Geyer. If you have a honeycomb collective, you might want to get it out because we're going to do some highlighting in it for the week of May 27th, which crosses into the first week of June. And we are going to talk about this chart. Hey, Jenny.
Hey, it's good to be here. Thank you everyone for coming back and for all of the positive feedback we've been getting. It's very encouraging. So thank you for staying with us.
Yeah, absolutely. We do appreciate it. Great point. Well, we have a new sheriff in town beginning yesterday or 2 days ago, don't we? Beginning Saturday. We have Jupiter and Gemini.
Yes, this is, I'm sure we're all feeling it already. The big note that I put for this week is learning from the past, accelerating into the future, and Jupiter's entrance into Gemini is a big part of that. First of all, we talked a little bit about Jupiter being in a little bit of an uncomfortable space in Gemini, and a lot of this can feel like to us taking on too much mentally, feeling scattered or anxious. We might feel very drawn to doing things, multitasking, when we don't necessarily have the energy or capacity to do that. So just be aware of that, and just make sure that you are saying yes to things that you can actually commit to. And that's a big thing with Jupiter and Gemini. And also sometimes we can maybe overanalyze or read too much into things, and maybe just try and take a step back and try not to take things too personally if it starts to feel that way. And I also talked a little bit about needing to kind of focus in on whatever grounding techniques are working for you. So if you have a lot of irons in the fire right now, it's a good chance you might get a sense of feeling burnt out. So just make sure you take time to tune in into your self-talk and make sure that you are giving yourself, space to breathe, relax, and say no if you need to take a break. Give yourself time to rest.
That is so perfect. In fact, within an hour of us starting to record this, I've been feeling frazzled. Have you been feeling frazzled?
Big time.
Big time. Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, I guess big time would be, well, it's Jupiter.
Yep.
Okay. So a couple of things. So, I moved to California back in March, and I'm here to basically assist a very good friend who I met, rented one of her rooms when I was in Aspen for 3 years. And we just became really good friends. And she's not in the best of health, but still has plenty of life left, and wants to live it to the fullest. And this little community where we are out here they have all kinds of activities, and they're having an activity tomorrow. And I thought she had told me it was in June, but now, the text came in that it was tomorrow. And she needs to get tickets, and would I like to go? And I just was like, no.
Yeah.
I had in my mind 3 weeks from now, that's enough time and I just, in that instant, knew that my plate was too full, got too much going on. It is absolutely Gemini type stuff. And I've got a new term, I kind of like a few terms, right? Enjoy the journey, live your highest timeline, circle the wagon. And maybe we ought to bring this one in, because there are times that we need to circle our own wagon. And what you just described is exactly that. And that's the characteristic of Jupiter as it's going to be going through Gemini. We'll talk about detriment here in a minute, but let's just stay with the theme of all of these mercurial type things are going to get expanded. They already are. And it's stronger now because things amplify when the exact transition ingress, if you want to use a good old astrology term, when Jupiter moves into Gemini, that's when it's more amplified. So
absolutely. And this is definitely going to be felt for people like you. I think you have Gemini rising, right? This is
yeah. And I'm living 10 miles from my Jupiter line, so it's like, holy wow.
Yeah. So people with prominent air and fire places, myself, are going to feel this. Is probably being a little uncomfortable at first, but we have a full year to get used to it. So once we get past this bumpy beginning, I think we'll all be a little bit more calmed. But and there's some good things too about Jupiter and Gemini. I mean, Jupiter is still considered the greater benefic. He's got a lot of things that he brings as far as opportunities and luck. And I think that, it's important to focus in on that too, because there's a lot of learning opportunity that's going to come through for all of us when Jupiter is transiting through Gemini. So just give yourself grace when you're learning something new. You're not always going to get it right away, and that's okay. And sometimes you might try something new and decide it's not for you. And it's okay to walk away from that too and move on to the next thing. So just give yourself a lot of space and grace.
Yeah, that's well said. So let's talk about detriment for a second, because, and I'm realizing this is kind of what we're talking about. So I just set these to the times, and I did this really early this morning before the first cup of tea had set in. But this is right there. I mean, it's just right on the cusp. So picture that as that's where Jupiter entered Gemini. But Gemini is opposite Sagittarius. Jupiter, right here, rules Sagittarius. The opposite sign of the sign that a planet rules is considered not the happiest place for that sign to be, for one, or for that planet to be. For one, it's opposition. So when we talk about this Jupiter moving in, we know that Jupiter expands, and usually it expands with good things. Abundance, abundance of good, but sometimes it can expand what's just there. And in this detriment thing, how do you perceive Jupiter in detriment?
Well, that's really what I was just talking about. It's just, can come through as a feeling overwhelmed and taking on too much mentally. It can be very mentally stimulating as well. It can also just be a lot of new opportunities, new information coming through. And that, like I said, can be overwhelming, but, there's coping mechanisms that we can use to make sure that we are, staying alert and present with our energies to notice when that's happening and to nip it in the bud and go through whatever grounding exercises work for you to work through it. And also, like you said, learning how to take time, give yourself space, and say no if you need to. If you just don't feel that you have the energy to commit to something, then it's okay to just say, you know what, I don't think I am up for this right now, or I'd rather focus on this instead because that's what I have the capacity to take on. I don't want to take too long on Jupiter though, because we do have a lot to go through this week. It's not
all right. Let's roll on then.
Yes. And this is really kind of important too, to focus in on what Mercury has been up to, because Mercury is the host of all of this activity that's happening in Gemini. And he's the host right now of Jupiter in Gemini. And I think Mercury has a really very complete lesson plan for us. And he's been making a lot of important transits and aspects of the other planets for the last several months. And I think that we're going to see that now that he's transiting through Taurus, there's again this opportunity to figure out grounding ways of staying in balance with our bodies, in our mind body, finding balance, healthy diet, making sure that you are making time for joy, things that bring you fulfillment in a very sensual way. And the purpose of building these kinds of systems for ourselves is that we have access to a full package of self-care for when we need it, for when we feel overwhelmed. And all of these lessons are about really building up our sense of emotional intelligence. And that is a theme of the week, really, because he's also going to make a couple of aspects to the two planets now transiting through Pisces, which is a very emotional, imaginal space. And that's Neptune and Saturn. First, he's going to be sextiling Saturn, and that's coming through the very beginning of this week on Monday. And for me, I think of the metaphor of the story that a friend of mine told me once about when he was learning to sail. And he had a very unfortunate situation happen where he was on a boat and he miscalculated, and the top of the sail got stuck underneath of a bridge and he couldn't move. And he had to basically just either wait out the current until it got low enough where he could kind of duck under it. But the Coast Guard was called, and essentially the only solution was having to break down the sail, just piece by piece, break it down so they could get through. And so I consider this kind of moment a breaking down of the sail. There's a lot of things that we're clearing. There's a lot of things that need to go so that we can continue to move forward. It's not always the most comfortable thing to do. It's not a fun thing. I'm sure it was pretty embarrassing for my friend. But it's important, because we've got to keep moving. And it's about also this particular aspect, I think, because of where Saturn is and what Saturn signifies. This is a opportunity to kind of fortify our sense of self-worth by letting ourselves break down this old version that isn't working anymore so that we can make room for newer, healthier habits that are actually supporting our growth. So that's all happening Monday. Yeah. And then, of course, I have to talk a little bit about Wednesday. We have a Chiron aspect. Mars has been pretty quiet moving through Aries. He hasn't been making too much of a ruckus, which is strange, which is like, what is he up to over there? And I think we're going to find out when he touches with Chiron on Wednesday. And I've already talked a lot about Chiron and what he means to me. And it's just a very, quiet kind of energy usually. But when it's in Aries, I think it speaks a little louder. And I talked last week also about the symbolism of the tarot card, the Chariot, about how it's really important to be firm in your vision and to have direction. But there's also an importance in staying flexible, right? And being open to new ideas, because that might actually help you get to where you're going faster and more efficiently. So Mars and Aries likes to go fast, but it's important to also note that just because Mars likes to go fast doesn't mean you have to go fast. Even though you may want to move forward, you may want to put your pedal to the metal. It's important to, again, step back, give yourself time to breathe, and trust your gut. This Mars conjunct Chiron is all about, that innate sense of knowing, and that's going to help you make decisions and choices that are more aligned with your vision. So just trust that feeling that you get.
Excellent. Good. A lot of people talk about, and I don't know if there's even any correlation here, the ruler of Virgo is Mercury. But a lot of people say that Chiron should rule Virgo. So that almost kind of connects similar characteristics, maybe in a way, I don't know, of Chiron and Mercury, because they're cousin rulers of, or, some people say Virgo. And I don't even know if that's worth exploring, but it's kind of an interesting point.
I have heard that, and it is interesting. I don't know that I necessarily feel like every planet or asteroid needs to be attached to a particular zodiac sign. I think that's actually kind of like a limiting thing to put on these energies because they are so, primal. But I think that this particular placement of Chiron, and with everything happening in Gemini also, there is a message that's coming through about discernment. And that's definitely a very Virgo trait, right? Like, how we make decisions. Is it based on, what other people are pressuring us? Are we feeling pressured by outside, voices, or are we listening to our own, gut, our intuition, our instincts? And that's very much, Aries energy. So Chiron and Aries right now, I think it's about, yes, you can move fast. Yes, you can do all these things. Yes, you can stay on your path, but just make sure that you are tuning into your gut and you're not just, setting the track and going for it and not really thinking about, is this still the right path? Am I still, is this still the best route to take? These kinds of questions will come up, and it's important, again, be true to yourself.
We've got 3 big energies in here. The North Node in Aries, which we know has had quite a profound impact. A lot of challenge. Mars can be aggressive. It can be progressive, like you can really move forward on some of those wounded areas, but it also could trigger a war inside.
For sure. Yeah, I think that's part of it. And I think that, on the higher timeline living, we like to think about, how we can transform that energy into something positive, something useful, something that's going to help us get to where we want to go. And I think that's, it's easy, and again, with all this Gemini energy, to kind of lose sight of your vision and get stuck in overthinking about, things and whether this is the right path, or am I doing it right? Do I look okay doing it? All these things come to mind. But again, this Mars and Chiron has been having a conversation with us. It's been a long lesson plan, and it's continuing because Chiron's going to be in Aries for a couple more years. But I think that all of this energy in this chart right now is pointing to that the simplest path is often the right one. If you don't have to give it too much thought, the first thought, best thought. Mars is all about action and that initial instinctive movement forward. And I think Chiron is just saying, trust that, it's okay. Those instincts are there for a reason.
Absolutely. Good. All right. This is another interesting one. Back to Mercury. Mercury's got this theme this week, doesn't it? Big Mercury week. Hello, Mercury and Uranus.
Oh my gosh, this is one of my favorite. Anytime Mercury has contact with Uranus, I think it's really exciting.
This is a conjunction too. They're together.
Right. Yeah. And so once, Mercury's almost finished up with Taurus and he's going to be last man standing on this, except for Uranus. Uranus is obviously going to be spending a little bit longer still in Taurus. But this contact with Mercury and Uranus feels like a big eureka moment. I think that for a lot of people, something that has been kind of vexing you maybe will just suddenly click and will make sense. And you'll have some idea of how to approach an issue, a problem that you've been dealing with. And there'll be a breakthrough. I wrote in my notes, this is from Thomas's podcast, Subconscious Mind Mastery, that this will be a big Jenga block clearing moment for people, I think.
Okay, we got to tell them the story. When we do this thing on Sunday nights, I got a set of Jenga, the Jenga game, and I set it up on the desk, and I thought, this is the coolest thing of our growth process, because when you are trying to eliminate the little Jenga cubes, some of them slide out very easily, don't they? Like no resistance at all. And the tower stays intact. Some of them, though, you pull on it and it's not going anywhere. And if you put more pressure on it, it's going to collapse the whole thing and Jenga's over. So it just seemed to me to be such a great metaphor for life of, that's exactly what happens. Some issues, we just release them and it's like, yeah, not a big deal. Others, the universe comes along, puts a little pressure on us, says, hey, are you willing to release this? And we're like screaming and kicking and fighting. And if we do, it just brings everything down for us. It's a great metaphor. Thank you.
And especially with Mercury, I mean, it's all about, he loves games. Mercury's always associated with board games and, volleyball and tennis, things like that. I think that it's an appropriate metaphor for the Gemini energy too. And that brings us to another really big aspect of the week later on, happening on Sunday. Jupiter is trining Pluto. Now, I personally see this as a positive aspect. I'm very Sagittarius. I'm erring the side of optimism all the time. But for me, this is about, now we've pulled the Jenga block out and maybe there's a little bit of a mess behind, right? Maybe the blocks fell down and it feels a little bit like chaotic, perhaps. But I think ultimately what we got from that Mercury Uranus, whatever that moment of breakthrough was, is bringing clarity. And some area that may have felt foggy or confusing is starting to make sense to us, at least. So now we know at least what we need to do to move forward. And so, yes, we have a mess to clean up, but we know where it is and we know how to clean it up. And we know it's just going to take a matter of just directing our attention to it and doing what needs to be done. And because there's so much, I think, positive support coming from the other planets and the aspects happening around it, I think that it won't be too difficult to kind of, reach out for the support that you need. Reach out to a good friend. If you have a therapist, talk to your therapist about it. And, there's a chapter closing, and it's something that you'll be grateful to kind of tuck away and be done with and move on to the next thing.
Excellent. Good. Yeah. And you've got two power planets here. So this is going to be charged, but it is a trine. So this is some really good, powerful, positive energy. And this is the whole lucky theme that we've been on this week. Boom, right there. There it is. There's kind of and I guess it's going to roll into next week, but this is just a really good, powerful aspect. And we'll be baking in it all week because the sun will be, or Jupiter will be positioning itself. Pluto's just kind of sitting there, actually moving backwards. But yeah, this is going to be a good one.
Yeah. And like I said, I think there's a lot of positive support. This week is going to feel, I think, maybe compared to previous weeks where we've had a lot of very exciting, big energies. This will feel maybe a little bit more subtle, a little bit more personal. There might be even a little bit of melancholy because of the Mercury touching with Pisces. And so that may be not necessarily challenging, but just kind of, murky.
And there's one other aspect, and this is an interesting one. On Sunday night, late, almost midnight Eastern time, Mercury is going to sextile Neptune. So let me just point these out real quick. There's Neptune in Pisces, and there's Mercury just almost out the door of Taurus. In fact, it goes out the next day, but we'll talk about that next week. But yeah, there's a sextile 60 degrees right there.
So again, this really pivotal point of Pisces at 29 degrees being highlighted just as it was when we had that nice little Jupiter-Venus conjunction sextiling Neptune last week. This is a kind of quiet, soft aspect. And it's a nice little bookend to the end of the week where we started Mercury off sextiling Saturn in Pisces. And now he's finishing up in Taurus, sextiling Neptune in Pisces. And this is a very quiet, soft aspect. And for some people, it might come through like a bit of a feeling of melancholy. It's a very subtle feeling. It may feel like even a little bit of grief, because whatever we cleared out that was maybe a little bit difficult or felt a little bit chaotic, that shook us up maybe a little bit around that Mercury-Uranus conjunction earlier, it was cleared out to make room for something new. We are, Pisces is about imagination. It's about the place of absolute potential. And we know that reality is a reflection of our beliefs. So when we have when we take time to reflect on what we believe and how we would like our future to unfold, this is a great opportunity to start imagining what it is that you want to believe in and see reflected in your reality. And Mercury sextiling Neptune is giving you the support to do that. So, the way I interpret this aspect is the power of your free will is the starting point to manifesting what it is you truly desire. And and understanding that every choice that you make doesn't just add up to create your past or your memory. It's also the structure that you stand on when you start to build your future. So pay attention to the choices that you're making. And as you go through the week and all through Gemini season, and really, in life, it's good to pay attention to the choices you're making to make sure that they're always aligned, that they're, staying aligned with whatever that vision is, that beautiful vision you have for yourself. And that aspect takes me to the tarot card that I pulled for this week to represent.
Awesome.
Let me pull that out. So the tarot card that I have here is Justice. You can see that.
Nice.
Oops, camera. There we go.
There we go.
And I wanted to read a just short excerpt on what justice is symbolizing from a book that I love, Rachel Pollack's 78 Degrees of Wisdom, a tarot journey to self-awareness. It's a great book. I highly recommend it, especially if you're into tarot, but it's also just a great book. So anyway, the quote: justice indicates the way to understanding lies in the responsibility. As long as we believe that our past lives just happen, that we do not bring ourselves into existence through everything we do, then the past remains a mystery and the future an endlessly turning wheel, empty of meaning. But when we accept that every event in our lives has helped to form our characters and that in the future we will continue to create ourselves through our actions, then the sword of wisdom cuts through the mystery. Before such a release can happen, we must accept the justice of our lives. What we are, we have made ourselves.
Wow. Love that.
Heavy stuff, but important.
I'm just thinking, like, again, a cousin line is that our very path is our guru, is our teacher.
Absolutely.
And I just think whenever judgment tries to creep in on anything, I just think, wait a minute. Our path is our teacher. How can you say anything about somebody else's path when that's their teacher, not yours? Leave it alone. It's kind of the best. Just observe and support each other in our journey. And that's great. Wow. So, I was just wondering, would you think that this, let me just roll back here real quick. I was just thinking about strongest aspects of the week. I'm looking at this one. This Jupiter, let's just go back through. So we started with Jupiter enters Gemini, Mercury sextiling Saturn. That's another soft aspect. That's the other bookend that you were just mentioning. Mars and Chiron. That's about all about us doing our inner work. And then there's Mercury and Uranus. Trusting your gut. Yeah, Sybil, absolutely. And then there's Mercury, Uranus. Who knows what could happen on Friday?
Don't even try to guess. Don't even try to anticipate. Just let it happen.
It's like just roll, REO Speedwagon, roll with the changes, right? And then boom, like Sunday, Jupiter trines Pluto. To me, it seems like this is the one that's going to be the strongest because these, first of all, they're both slower. We're going to be baking in this all week, it seems to me. So if I were to pick a theme of the week, I don't know. I would pick this one, I think. What would you say?
I mean, it's big and flashy because we do have some heavy hitters making an aspect for that one. But again, I think it's important to focus on where the support's coming in, because it could be experienced as a difficult energy for some people. But I think ultimately, like, every challenge that we face is really a test of our core belief system in ourselves and in whatever faith that you have, and whatever higher power that you believe exists. Our faith is always tested, and I think when you know that you have support, when you have friends, when you have some kind of creative outlet that energizes you, leaning into those things and letting them be there and letting them then hold you in those difficult moments is just a part of being a human. And I think anytime that you can find a way to give yourself grace in those difficult moments, is you're learning more about yourself, you're learning more about your own power. And that's really why I love astrology, because for me it's just about telling the story of how you come into your own power, and through all these really beautiful big archetypal energies that the planets represent to us. So again, my quote for my theme of the week is learning from the past, accelerating into the future, because you can't move into the future until you've made peace with your past. That's really about just taking responsibility for the choices that you have made that have brought you to where you are, and being grateful for being where you are, because you wouldn't have gotten here without those choices. So don't judge yourself. Don't be too hard on yourself. We've all come to where we are through trial and error, and that's okay.
Yeah. Beautiful. Wow. What a great way to wrap it up. And thank you for all the work that you did to put this week together for us. Really
Thank
appreciate
you,
it.
Thomas, for all your patience.
Excellent job. And we'll see you guys next week with the Moon to Sun weekly forecast. Thanks for joining us.